Hey guys, I got a couple interesting guns. I already pre-teased this by telling you I have a couple Smith & Wessons to show you. And you know, whenever I do a video and I get a lot of comments, there are some people who say, Tom, you don't know what the heck you're talking about. Well, here's my response to that. You ain't seen nothing yet, because these I knew absolutely nothing about. But I had two Smith & Wessons, a Russian and a Schofield. I had two come in the same week. The guy who gave me the Schofield, which is this gun, also gave me this article and say, this is really fascinating, you should read it. And I remember I said, yeah, I'm not gonna read that. It was a Friday and he said, oh, you might wanna read it over the weekend. Well, lo and behold, I read the article over the weekend and I was fascinated. It's a gun. Both of these guns are a gun with a really cool story behind it. So I'm going to go over these guns, also offer you this article if you're like me and say, I'm not that interested. All you have to do is email us, and the email's right there. Email us and say, interested in the article. We have it scanned in, and wherever you are in the world, we can email it over to you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the story of the Schofield and its connection to San Francisco. So the story of these two guns, first of all, starts off with a Smith & Wesson Model 3. This is a Smith & Wesson Model 3. I think actually this was, even though this model came before the Schofield, and the Schofield is a modification of the Model 3. I'll explain that in a minute. I believe this gun was made later. This Model 3 is actually considered a Russian gun because of the serial number. We know 40,000 of these went to Russia. Now, that was during the Tsarist days, and it's in the 1870s. They ordered revolvers. These were state-of-the-art at the time. I'll talk a little bit about those innovations. But they ordered 40,000 of them for their troops. I don't know if this actually went. The condition of this gun is so good, it makes me wonder how it went to Russia, participated in a lot of the wars and rebellion over there, and came back to the United States in this condition. So I suspect that some of the guns never were delivered, but certainly there was an order for 40,000 guns. And also, the U.S. Army ordered, at least they did some testing on the Model 3, and Schofield, General Schofield, he actually did some modifications to make it easier to use for cavalry officers. So this was specifically made for cavalry officers, and the United States Army ended up ordering about 8,000 of these. This is one of the 8,000 that was ordered, and then later we'll tell you how, because of this property mark on the back, this one ended up in San Francisco to quell the rioting. So let me tell you that story, but first let me come up and show you a little bit about these guns. Okay, so you can see the condition of the blue. Like I said, let's start with the Model 3. These were made pretty plentifully in the 1870s, meaning there was quite a few of them made. So the time period is right after the Civil War. Now, we know in the Civil War, the Army used a lot of Colts. This is a single-action Army Colt, a model 1860. So this is what the Army was using then. We know that they ordered thousands and thousands of these, and this was state-of-the-art at the time. But because during wartime, there's always weaponry innovations. And the Civil War was not any different in that they made all kinds of weapon innovations. The first thing that comes to mind is the Gatling gun. But another innovation was the production of the revolver using a cartridge. So let's go back. We know that this is cap and ball. If you remember, the cap goes on here. You load it using this rammer device. And so you load it. You have to take the cylinder off, take the wedge out, take the cylinder out, put in the ball, put in the cap. All that while you're a cavalry officer is a lot of work. The innovation of the cartridge, actually it was invented in Europe much earlier. Actually before the Civil War they had cartridges, but they were never put into full production until Smith & Wesson started to do that in the late 1860s, early 1870s. So this is what Smith & Wesson came up with, and they did send samples to the U.S. Army to test out. And let me show you a little bit about the action here. So the hammer this is very smooth. The military one is the hammer is a lot stronger, and that was because it was made to tighter specifications. I'll show you some other changes as well. But what I wanted you to see is the other technology. Remember what it took to load this cylinder. This technology was the break open technology, which it really takes two hands. You pull that back and then you push this up. The rear sight comes up and then it breaks open. So it takes two hands. Let me show you that again. Smooth action, pull up, the whole rear sight comes up, and then it breaks open, and then you can see this ejects the shells. Again, that whole assembly is a new invention as well. You load up, these were 44 caliber Smith & Wesson. The Schofield, by the way, is going to be 45. Again, the military wanted a slightly stronger cartridge. So it opens up, it ejects the shells, you load them up, close it, and you're ready to fire. So when General Schofield was looking at this particular gun in trials, he decided to make some modifications, again, to make it more user-friendly for officers in the Army, and particularly cavalry officers. Now, a side note is his brother, John Schofield, was in the procurement department of the U.S. Army, so he had a vested interest in developing something that could be procured by the Army for the cavalry officers. So let's just take a look at some of the differences. You can see here that it is the frame and the barrel are reinforced a little bit, and again, that is for military use. It just made it a little bit stronger. The sight is simplified a little bit, maybe to cut costs, I'm not sure. But the most important feature that I noticed, by the way, I should say, these grips are not original. They were added later. So this is a Russian with fancier grips on it. Yeah, somebody put like inlay, and then you see the Smith & Wesson logo. So a little bit about that. This Russian Smith & Wesson Model 3 has replaced grips. These are the original grips on the Schofield, and you can see 1877. The cartouche is the military inspection, and there's a cartouche. These cartouches tend to be very clear. That's the inspector. Also, the grips are numbered to the gun. So let's take a look at, I was talking about the differences. Here's the most important difference. You can see, here's the Russian Model 3, and this is a simplification. Now, what makes it more simple is you pull this back, and it pops open. That's extremely helpful, and I'm going to show you why while I'm riding my trusty steed. Okay, now remember, he wants it to be easier to use by cavalry officers. So this is my trusty steed, and I'm riding my horse. I'm not going to point this at the camera, but all I have to do is with one hand, other hand on the reins, all I have to do is pull the hammer back, pull the rear sight back, and pop it open that way. So one-handed. Now, I don't think I can load it one-handed, but I guess I have to put the reins down, or I could put the bullets in my teeth and put it in that way. Just kidding, of course, but the whole point of it was easier to load, unload, and reload using minimum hands. You definitely have to use two hands at some point, but it was designed to work simply while you're riding a horse. I hope you enjoyed my demonstration. One other thing I wanted to show you about these, almost every one that I've seen, and I did search the internet. By the way, I thought Schofield was a Bible, not a revolver. So I did read up on the Schofields, and I saw several of them sell. All of them had a very brown patina here. Almost, if you look at this is a lot more, smooth in terms of the colors are the same. But almost every one that I saw had a blued frame, but then a brown cylinder and brown barrel. What I found was that the finish on these was not too well applied, and it would turn brown or flake off. You can maybe even see the flaking where it goes from blue to brown. I think as it heated up, as the barrel heated up, it caused some flaking to the finish. So that's a common feature that you'll see on the Schofield. Very rare, they only made 8,000 of them. Now this one is marked 42 on the back. It looks like a rack number, and that's almost what it is, a rack number. But let me tell you a little bit about the story of this particular Schofield. So this is what I learned from reading this article, and you're welcome to get a copy and read it for yourself. The date of 1877 and the rack mark on the back What it tells me in 1877 was during the Long Depression. Now, you've all heard of the Great Depression. We know 1929 into the 30s, the Great Depression. But did you know that before that there was a Long Depression, and it happened in the 1870s. It lasted 10 years. And it was a result of the Industrial Revolution. After the Civil War, there was all these innovations, steel, railroads, a lot of industry and mechanization of society. That put people out of work. Also, the railroads, at one time there were hundreds of railroad companies, and they consolidated down to just a few and got rid of a lot of employees. So you had high unemployment, you had rising costs, and so a lot of people were unemployed. So cities throughout the United States had violence and rioting and looting going on. And of course, the gentry didn't like the fact that the new immigrants coming in, those were the ones all losing their jobs. The new immigrants coming in, losing their jobs, unemployed, they begin to riot in the cities or loot in the cities. And so then the gentry, of course, wants to put down the rebellion using firearms. In San Francisco, it was unique in that the immigrants, the rioting wasn't unique, but the immigrants were all Chinese. And what happened was there was 100,000 Chinese laborers brought in for the railroads, but then when the labor was done, the Chinese had no jobs and no place to go. And so the citizenry, as we'll call it, came in and burned down Chinatown. They rioted and looted, killed some Chinese people. So in this circumstance, the law enforcement, basically the town council, hired posses or citizen soldiers to come forward and help put down the rioting. Again, the Chinese were not rioting. The people who were losing their jobs to the cheap labor, they were the ones who were rioting and killing the Chinese. So they actually wrote to Washington and said, we need help. We need arms. We want to arm our citizens. And so the town council brought together some of the more respectable, business owners, shop owners. They brought them all together to kind of quell the rioting. And they armed them with Schofields that came from the U.S. Army. So the Army base near there was ordered deliver. The first order was for 300 of these to be delivered to the city of San Francisco for law enforcement. Later on, there was probably another 100. Because what we find is on the back, this number 42, the numbers go up to about 400. So that rack number, there was about 400 guns and holsters that were given to the town of San Francisco to quell the rioting that was going on. Again, they're rioting against the immigrants who were taking away their jobs. Now, if you think my explanation of world history was not good enough, ask for the article because I didn't do it justice, but I found it fascinating, the history of the gun going to the cavalry, but then also helping to quell the rioting in San Francisco. I think it's a phenomenal story. And here's something else I learned about the Schofield. So it was state-of-the-art at the time. And there was a lot of well-known gunfighters or Westerners who had one. For example, Jesse James had a Schofield. Teddy Roosevelt had a Schofield. Now that's not a big surprise because actually Teddy Roosevelt owned a lot of guns. He probably had one of everything, although I don't think he ever had a Walther PPK. Virgil Earp was another one who carried a Schofield, and Billy the Kid had a Schofield. Wyatt Earp had a Model 3, so not quite a Schofield, and Annie Oakley had a gold-plated Model 3 that was given to her by her husband. Okay, if that's not enough interesting tidbits, here's one more. General Schofield, who had a patent, and his name is actually on it because he had the patent, and I'm not sure if it had a connection to his brother, but obviously the military procurement department was ordering these, and ironically, because Schofield had owned the patent, he got a commission or a royalty on every gun that the U.S. Army ordered. Depending on what you read, there's a little bit of controversy about, his brother was on the board that made the decision, and then he got paid a royalty. And Smith & Wesson didn't like it very much because the government contract was very little profit. I mean, they ordered 8,000, and then they had to pay a royalty to Schofield. They didn't like what was going on, so they stopped making them. The Army wanted more, and they just said, no, thank you. And which is, by the way, Colt then, of course, stepped up. And so we know that Colt ended up getting a lot of contracts. So the Schofield was short-lived. It probably could have sold a lot more. And so General Schofield probably could have become a very wealthy man, but it just never worked out. Consequently, another piece of history, General Schofield shot himself with his own pistol. So, a very storied gun with a lot of history. I hope you learned something, because I sure did. From beginning to end of this video, I learned a lot, and I'm sure I'm going to learn even more when you comment. Please keep it respectful, but love to hear from you. Thanks for watching. Make sure you like and subscribe.